Okay, so now you should have a decent understanding what we have in regards to a multiple form application. You played around with it by learning how to create multiple forms, and now you can kind of see how an application might look. I'm not saying every application looks this way. It doesn't. You guys have got to understand that every situation is going to be different. But for the most part, every application that you may write in the real world will probably have multiple forms to it or multiple pages if it's a web-based application. And so you got to need to consider that. And again, how it looks, how it feels, how it navigates is going to be different based on every situation you deal with. You may not have a little navigation page like this. You might have a startup page that's totally different, and just there's buttons that take it to another level and so on based upon having to complete more information based upon information possibly being populated. Meaning if I populate this, I got to fill out this other form and so on. So every situation is different, and I could go on and on about all the differences. So what you need to learn from this is just the basics. How do I get from one form to another? This particular video, though, we're going to kind of introduce this whole concept that we talked about in the last video where, wow, there's a lot of duplication in our code. So we have some similarities, matter of fact, a ton of similarities in this particular application. That doesn't usually happen every time you do a multiple form application. So I kind of made it really broad in this case where there is a lot of similarities in this case. So there's not a lot of things that are different from purchasing and leasing in regards to the same code, okay? And so as you see, there's a lot of similarities here in the code. Some of the things that are differences that calculate the total versus calculating the monthly price in the lease. So one of the things that we do as programmers is here's the lease one right here, and you'll see down here the monthly price is a little bit different, okay, than what we had in the purchase. So one of the things that we as programmers, we want to do when we write our programs is to write them as efficiently as possible, where we minimize the amount of code we actually write, and we maximize the reuse of code we actually write. Why do we do that? Well, for obvious reasons. Number one, less work. Number two, easy to maintain. I don't want the same code being used all over the place or rewriting the same code in multiple places. Meaning in my project, writing the same code in my project multiple places, or really in the place I work. If I'm a programmer and Fred's a programmer and Sally's a programmer and Becky's a programmer, and we're all writing these programs that we're, for our company, and there's minute similarities to them, I don't want to write code that maybe a little function or procedure that I'm writing that Fred, Becky, and I forgot who I said, Sally, is also writing. So we want to write stuff one time that can be shared between the four of us, and we write it one time. That's the whole concept of this modularity that we're getting into, which is going to lead us all the way to object-oriented, which is the utmost purpose of object-oriented is sharing our code among the people that we work with. Remember, you may go work at a place like Procter & Gamble that has 600 programmers there. And of those 600 programmers, they want one set of code. We don't want to share stuff. And so that's what we as programmers try to do is eliminate repetition, eliminate redundancy, and so on. Does that make sense? Okay. So when you look at these things right here, so we're going to go to the first step in this. We're going to look for redundancy in our own project. This is project alone. And we see this redundancy. So what can we do? Well, what we do in this case is this. We sit back and we have to find a place where we can take this common code that can be used in multiple places and place it, and then actually allow our forms to still use it. So instead of having it in two different spots, we have it in one spot, and then we can actually call it from those two spots, meaning lease form and the purchase form, stuff that's common between the two, we can put in a spot and actually do that. Does that make sense? Well, what is that spot called? That spot is called a standard module. It is a module that we will put in our project in which we will put things in there that can be shared among multiple forms. So how do we do that? Well, it's fairly easy. If you got the whole idea of adding a form, a module is no different. We're going to come here, we're going to say add, and we're going to click on module versus Windows form. When we click on module, it will take us to here, and you'll name this module. The Hungarian notation for modules, MOD, and then you give it for what you actually want. Maybe you want to say auto, I don't know, auto calculations or something like that. Whatever you feel is needed. Usually, it's a grouping of things that have the same theme to it. That's what's kind of cool about it. So what I'll do is I'll hit add here. And what you will see now is that this module actually shows up right there it's part of our project now, okay? Now, what are we going to do in these modules? Well, what we're going to do in these modules, again, is usually share things, okay? And when we share things, we got to change the way we actually write our particular functions or procedures. If you recall, I'm going to go over here and just grab one. And so just for sake of example, let's grab something here. We'll do this one right here, subtotal. Okay, and let's get back to my module. And when I sit back and I look at this right here, this particular module is sitting right here. What we're going to do is, I'm not saying we're sharing this one or not, we're just looking at an example, but if this was a particular function that needs to be shared between two or more different forms within your project, we need to make it shareable. And right now it's not. Any ideas why? Anyone? So it's the word private. Private means it's only available to that form in which you're actually working in. If you notice before, everything we have over here is private. Excuse me. And that means that this is only can be used within this form itself. Okay? So when we have things that are called private, they are, again, it's only part of that form or only part of that module it can actually be worked in, okay, when you have a private function. To make it so it can be shared among all forms, we got to change what's called an access modifier. That private is called an access modifier. Dim is an access modifier. And so on. And the access modifier we're going to change it to is public. So as soon as you put public there, that access modifier, access, A-C-C-E-S-S, meaning who can access it, that's what we're talking about. Public means anybody can access it. When I say anybody, any form within your project can access it. Does that make sense? All right. We can do this with procedures. We can do this with functions. We can do this with constants. And we can do this with variables. When you do a public variable like this, public, and we'll say DBL total as double, and we have this public variable, this is a new scope for you when it comes to a variable. Right now, you know scope as local, meaning it's going to, we define it within a procedure, and anything we define in the procedure will actually go out of memory at the end of the procedure, correct? And it's only accessible to things within that procedure, local scope. Class level says it's only accessible within the class, in this case, the form, okay, or the module. Meaning when I do a dim, okay, like we did up here, let's see, do I have any here? I don't have constants. But these constants are class level constants, meaning they can only be used within this form itself, okay? They can't be shared anywhere else. This mod, so if I have a variable that I actually want to share among multiple forms, that's how you do it. It's called public. The term for that is global. And a global variable stays in memory until the entire project is done. Local stays in memory until the procedure ends or function ends. Class stays in memory until you end the form. So now that actually has changed a little bit. We used to say class level stays in memory until the program ends. Truly, it's really when the form ends. Global stays in memory until the program actually ends. Let's talk about this a little bit more. So global variables, if you go and read books on this and you go look at a VB book or you have another teacher or so on, they will tell you right off the bat that you should never in a million years use a global variable. This is total disdain in using global variables. There's a reason for this. We have a project here that has 3 forms and a module in it now. Not too bad. Most of your projects could have up to 100 forms and so on. What we don't want is global variables being set and changed all the way through those 100 forms. We can't follow that. That's why using a global variable is considered bad programming. Will it work? It will. But trust me, once you're handed a program and you want to enhance it, and your job is to try to figure out what the global variable is doing, and you have hundreds of forms and thousands of lines of code, and you're trying to follow that around, it becomes, you're spending hours just trying to figure out what's going on. So we try to refrain from using global variables. I'm one that sits back and says, well, if it's simple and you set it one time and maybe reference it at other places, I'm good with a global variable at times. I think it's actually better to use a global variable than not in those situations, meaning you set it one time in one place and it may be referenced other places. But if you're constantly changing it in different places, you should be passing that data versus using a global variable. Okay, so public is considered global. Public here is, in a sense, it's global, but this is a global function. You can use those. Those are fine. These are the ones that are accessible everywhere else. When it comes to variables, you just need to be careful when it comes to a global variable. Okay, so once again, this is a module. Now, within a module, I can have a private function if I wanted to, but if I did, it would just be a private function that only works within this module. Why would you have that? Well, maybe it's possible I have a public function that calls this private function to get something that maybe it breaks down a little bit more. I don't want people calling this private function. I want them calling this public function, but in here I call it. So I'm going to say as Bob, boom, boom, as double, and we'll have a return in here of something. I don't know why I would do this, but let's just say up here I am DBL total equals Bob, okay? That's function right there. Really bad example. The whole idea is that this function is only going to be used within this public function. So you could have a private function in a module if you like. But the forms are only going to call this one, okay? I hope that makes sense in what I'm trying to say. But most of the time what we're trying to do when it comes to a module is put things in here that is shared among multiple forms, and that's what we're doing here. And we do that by changing the access modifier, which is called this right here, from private to function, okay? I'm sorry, private to public, all right? Make sure you understand that. But again, very easily, how do you add it? It's not too hard, right click, add, and you put a module there, okay? Why are we doing this? To actually put code that can be that's shareable among different forms. In the next video, we'll take this one step further and we will go ahead and build this thing out and show you how it all works.